Dan O'Shea, who was the hostage negotiator in Iraq for several years, running hundreds of hostage cases, is going to join us and really tell us what's going on with that whole situation. So he's Lieutenant Commander, former U.S. Navy SEAL, a Naval Academy grad, good friend of the show, good friend of mine. And we're going to talk about this abduction that happened recently. So, Dan, thank you for coming on, my friend. I appreciate it.
Yeah, always good to see you, Todd. Hey, by the way, you keep demoting me. I'm a commander, not a lieutenant commander. So
shit, man, my apologies.
No.
I'm a Navy guy, so those ranks kind of screw me up, you know.
You're just doing Air Force math. That's all.
That could be. So I got to make a note of that. I don't want to do that again. My apologies.
No dramas.
So this whole thing is bizarre. I mean, first of all, before we get into that, tell people about your background, because I want people to know who the level of expertise they're talking to here.
So I obviously Navy commander, SEAL background, a total of 91 to 2020. So 29 odd years of active and reserve service. But it was after 9/11, I came back on active duty and I did basically 10 deployments over a decade, and 2 very long deployments. One was 2 years, one was 1 year. But my expertise, and why I'm constantly going on the news networks, and I've got 3 more interviews. I had 2 this morning. I have 3 more this afternoon. Maybe a 4th that was lining up right as I was dialing in, which was why I was a little bit late on the topic of kidnapping. Because I was in 2004. This was a month after the Nick Berg beheading. Everyone recalls that incident. I showed up in Baghdad on what was supposed to be a 4-month assignment, 120-day set of orders to work interagency coordination between the FBI, the agency, the State Department, and the military. I was from an organization at U.S. Central Command called the Joint Interagency Task Force, or JASIC, coordinating group. But bottom line is my job was to work as a liaison, and I literally was embedded in living with the FBI. I had a desk at the U.S. Embassy, and I had a blue badge access to the CIA. And but fate intervened. Literally, my first day that I arrived in country, I went to a morning meeting at the U.S. Embassy. I was the only military guy in the room, and the chief of staff for the Pole Mill Ambassador Newman, basically read off a list of events and came to the last item saying, hey, last order of business, 2 Bulgarian truck drivers were kidnapped in Mosul 10 days ago. Some guy named Zarqawi says he's going to cut their heads off unless the Bulgarians pull their troops out. And he looks around the room and says, listen, President Bush spoke to the President of Bulgaria. They're a valued member of the coalition. We will do everything we can to save the lives of these 2 hostages. And he points at me and says, Dan, you're a Navy SEAL. Go call your friends. And that's how this all got started. So I literally, like every other young enterprising, at the time a lieutenant commander, and I formed an interagency working group with smarter people than me. And I brought in assets from the intelligence community, law enforcement, FBI, special operations, the task force, and all of a sudden kidnappings were a daily occurrence. And in fact, the month I arrived, July of 2004, there were 31 international kidnappings. It went to 43 and then I think 56 over my 120 days in the box. I was literally dealing with a kidnapping case every day. And at one point we had 7 kidnappings in one day. So you can just imagine the stress level. It was out of control. But, I ended up committed and stayed and extended for what was the next 2 years of my life. Cost me my marriage and some other things, which every veteran can relate to. Many of us can relate to. Almost all of us.
I feel your pain.
Everyone in SOF. It was a 90% divorce rate in the SEAL teams before 9/11. I know it's the community across the back. It was because we were all gone. We were never home.
300 days a year doesn't do very much for a marriage. That's for sure.
No, and that was the average, if not worse. And but point being, I spent 2 years in Iraq dealing with the worst kidnapping crisis we had seen since probably Lebanon back in the 80s and 90s. And it was much like this case. It was high profile because these kidnappers were making kidnapping demands, ransom demands, with a knife at the hostages' head, and these were not idle threats. I woke up and watched beheading videos almost every morning because of the violence that was being perpetrated. So these were not false warnings. But I again worked over 448. We had 448 kidnappings over the 2-year period that we tracked these cases. I worked at 40 American kidnapping cases and then just hundreds of others, including a lot of the local kidnapping. So I got to see in the mindset about kidnappings where family members would get involved, jealousies, revenge. I mean, it was across the spectrum. And I saw the worst in humanity, but it's not limited to ISIS and Al Qaeda. The cartels in Mexico are just as violent, just as brutal. They've hunted down and killed, social media influencers in Mexico, young females. And, going back to getting on topic here with the Guthrie case, my initial thoughts, especially when I heard that there was blood at the scene, I hadn't even seen the pictures yet. So who's going to be violent enough to kidnap an 85-year-old woman, grandmother, who's obviously got health issues, and you have to, draw blood? Now, the rumor is that she's on blood thinner. So I've talked with some law enforcement experts, forensic experts. I've been on shows with them, a podcast on Saturday, and they said, yeah, that could have been nose drops, because there wasn't blood splatter in a way that that she was being beaten at the front, but she was either being carried or transported, but she was bleeding, and there were not insignificant amount of blood that came out. It was more than you would imagine. Now,
Really?
that tells me, yeah. And if I got to ask you, Todd, I mean, you don't need to be a forensic expert to know this. How do you draw blood on someone? Significant blood. You either punch them violently in the nose and break their nose so they're bleeding, or you have to have an instrument. You have to have a knife, right? You don't just, you can beat someone up and you're not going to draw blood unless, really the mouth and the nose are the only two areas I know of that will profusely bleed from simply
also,
being
if you hit somebody in the face, and cut and get a laceration of the face, that can bleed very profusely.
On the head, yes, but then again, did they beat her on the head, or did they punch her in the nose? I mean, but irrespective, the fact that the group was already prone to violence to get an 85-year-old woman or 84-year-old woman out.
Right.
And again, if you're doing this for a kidnapping, your prize is the victim. I mean, you don't get any money if you don't deliver the prize, which means, proof of life and that their health and well-being are taken care of. And even in Iraq, even though if an Al Qaeda group claimed responsibility for your kidnapping, we were going to see a beheading video within 48 to 72 hours. And we saw a lot of them. But there were other groups that were ideologically Salafist and Sunni, and they were in alignment with Al Qaeda, but they were willing to make a deal because they realized, hey, we can raise millions of dollars off these Western hostage victims. So they would play the game like the FARC would play down in Central and South America, political extortions and whatnot. Or then they wanted political concessions. They wanted troops pulled out of Iraq, which occurred. They wanted construction projects that were being, funded by U.S. taxpayers, all of a sudden couldn't get finished because the cost of providing security became so astronomical. You had to take that into the books when you were planning to rebuild a hospital in Basra. This $500 million project to build a state-of-the-art hospital in Basra never got finished because the cost to provide daily security was so prohibitive that ultimately projects all across Iraq were never finished because of the threat to the workers themselves, the worker bees, like just the average Iraqis or maybe front end.
Do you think that is the agenda, is money, or is there some other agenda behind this? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've been talking about this at length, and I'm not a forensics guy. I'm not going to give the law enforcement take on this, but I've been side by side with all these law enforcement and FBI retired agents, and they're all talking about the forensics in the case. And I'm going, stop, look at the motives. If they're really interested in money, why didn't they steal anything from her house?
Right.
If they're really interested in money, why aren't they negotiating directly with the family, which is how it's done? You don't reach out. Why would you send your ransoms demands to TMZ, a tabloid news network run by, what's that, it's not Harvey Weinstein, but it's that Harvey guy who's a, sensationalist journalist. All he's going to do is, and he put out the note because he wants more clicks to his side. So they did it intentionally, went to local news media networks and Harvey, TMZ for one purpose and one purpose only, to get this in the wire, to get this out there. So you tell me, Todd, what story, if you're trying to change the narrative of what's going on, the focus of the media, you want to get a story off the news? Well, what happened? Big news story, not even a week before Epstein files were released. Now, what's the connection to Savannah Guthrie? Now, beyond the fact that she probably makes $10 million a year as a news anchor, maybe $25 million. I don't know what those news networks make. Certainly not your salary, which you're getting as CEO of Creative Destructive Media, my friend. Probably you deserve it more than them. But point being, she has the money to pay that ransom. But why else would they target Savannah Guthrie and talk shows? She's not controversial.
Yeah, I've heard that it's, to take Epstein off the news or whatever, but I tend to think it's more sending a message, right? Like to someone. Like, because you had the
Of
thing
course.
when the elections went down in 2020, you had Brian Kemp come on the news and say, the governor, and say, we need to do an audit. And then all of a sudden his his daughter's boyfriend is blown up in a car with thermite on the highway. And all of a sudden those audits went away. So I think it's something similar to that. I mean,
Well, Savannah last year did a series of interviews with the Epstein survivors, including Virginia Guthrie, who we know now said not months, if not weeks before she died, that she was not suicidal. And yet yeah, killed herself. Exactly. So, so that is definitely a possibility because they've certainly, Epstein is no longer front and center on the news networks anymore. I am literally, I think I've done 15 interviews in the last 3 days. I just lined up another one right before we came on. I did News Nation this morning, you at 10. I've got Megyn Kelly, which I'm actually, put it this way. If you wanted to go after someone and you had an axe to grind, you'd go after a Megyn Kelly or a Candace Owens type of thing because they're very controversial. If you wanted to hurt someone, and then in such a divided country between left and right, this is not going after that. Meaning, this is someone inside the swamp trying to send a message because big picture wise, the swamp people want to stay in the shadows and not come out unless when they show up at Davos or the World Economic Forum, and then they can't hide the fact that they're flying their personal jets to Davos or wherever the hell when all the $2,000 a night hookers are coming in at the same token, and they want to preach to us about how we should live our lives and not use energy and start eating non-meat products and all the rest of that nonsense. So why would you go after someone? And I don't know Savannah. I don't watch her show. I mean, but she just by all accounts seems like a very decent human being and not a controversial figure. So why would they go after her? And the scary and sad part is watching this play out. I don't think I don't necessarily believe that the group sending the ransom notes are the group that is holding her or perpetrated an act where most of the law enforcement I'm talking to, especially in the last 48 hours, sadly, most people think she may not even have, it may have been a botched home invasion that went pear-shaped from the get-go. So they're using this media focus to keep the investigation spinning and going back to the house because they're trying to, get out of Dodge, whatever, because, who knows where they're at, but, you got to look at the border, the proximity to Mexico, cartels, I'm sure you've covered in the past, and I've certainly spoke about many times, very big into the kidnapping arena, and they're just as brutal and violent as any of the jihadist groups that have done these horrific, not only kidnappings, but tortures and executions. So I just think there's a lot of unanswered things, and now we're going into day 9. She hasn't presumably had her meds, and I did hear she's on blood thinners, but they make it. And in the plea that they made, they talked about her health. So every day
your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
A warm welcome here at the National Press Club. Welcome to the journalists, welcome to the Embraer team, and welcome to the other guests that we have here. We're going to announce, and as some of you guessed it right when they came in, the first E2 order by an American operator. And that operator is Avello. We believe this is really a strategic shift to unlock profitability for the customer. I'm very pleased that we have Andrew Levy here as the CEO of Avello, and I'm very pleased to give the stage to share a little bit more about what Avello is going to do with the E2 195. Thank you very much.
Couldn't be more excited to be here as part of this historic announcement. We have such a great cultural fit as companies, so we're very, very excited to be Embraer's newest customer. We launched our airline in April of 21, and our target is focusing on small secondary airports of large metro areas. We've carried over 8 million customers since we started on 63,000 flights. And we've done all these things with 1,200 of the greatest crew members I could ever imagine having, and many of them are here with me today. This is the right airplane for us. It's going to open up opportunities for us that no other aircraft can serve. The best thing about the airplane, of course, is you will not find a middle seat on this airplane. It doesn't exist. We won't have any to offer. It's going to be the best cabin in the United States, and we're so excited about that. This is going to elevate our experience to the highest level, and we think our customers are absolutely going to love the airplane.
sorry to interrupt. What was the ransom, by the way?
So the first ransom reportedly was $4 million. They came out, and then the one that just came in currently, and the deadline is 5 o'clock today, Mountain Time, Arizona time, is $6 million, and they want it transferred via Bitcoin. And you probably know more about Bitcoin than me, but it's it is secure. I mean, you can wirely transfer that Bitcoin. You're never going to see that money again, and that's why I know that Savannah and her family are at their wit's end. They're willing to do anything, but if they go through with that wire transfer, I'm praying they do not, because I think they're going to put money after good after bad, and they may never even get their mother back at this point. So you can't do a multi-million-dollar, much less $100,000 transfer for no guarantee. And I saw this play out, and we had a Brazilian CEO of a company, of a multinational construction company. He came over to go oversee this multi-million-dollar project in Iraq, in northern Iraq. And he came all the way from Brazil. It was right around Christmas. And he was jammed up to, check out the site. And he didn't skimp on security, because they had a security detail, a very professional one from the UK. And that morning there was threats on the road. And the security advisor told the CEO executive, "Hey, sir, we need to wait a day. We can't travel today." And the CEO was like, "Hey, you work for me. You're going to get me to the airport. I'm not missing Christmas with my family." My 4-year-old son, I believe he had a young boy.
Yeah.
And that decision ended up, they got into a T intersection. They got ambushed. And the last video was him. Some jihadi pulled out his cell phone, is videoing. And in the ambush, he had been wounded. And I remember a year later, they were trying for $1 million to get a pair of his glasses as proof that we have the body. So they were years later still trying to get his body back for $1 million. So these kidnappers are ruthless, and they have no morality, and that's why they can't be trusted.
So what is it about this Guthrie case that you see that other people may not see? I mean, what, from your professional experience?
I have seen kidnapping, the mindset. I've not only worked 400 odd kidnapping cases, I've studied this for the last 2 decades. I mean, I've met K&R consultants. I worked hostage cases. I understand the negotiating game. I don't throw I don't have a card out there throwing myself out as a negotiator. One, because I've done so much media. It's kind of hard to do this job. You really need to build everything about a hostage negotiation needs to be in the shadows. It needs to be behind the scenes. Most K&R consultants some will get on the phone, but in most groups, you advise the family, because the moment they hear a Westerner or an American voice or an English speaking voice, they're going to go, they hired professionals. They're going to up the ransom demand. So all the rules that in a normal kidnap for ransom scenario are out the door. So I think this is kidnapping for extortion, and it's extortion for, again, why are they going after Savannah Guthrie? Obviously, they're going after her, not her mother. Her mother just happened to be the victim they chose, but they could have gone after her sister. Would have been a much smarter move if you think about it. I mean, I don't think they go after her brother, as I understand, is an Air Force fighter pilot, and you can see on the videos he's not a small guy. I think he would give anyone trouble. Like I would expect to see blood on the ground, but it would be the assaulters, the abductors' blood. I would think if they went after, they target. They're smart, and there was a rumor that a white van had been in the neighborhood the week before. And as well as I do, I mean, it's Hollywood, any Hollywood movie. It's the guys in the white van that are doing surveillance with cameras and collecting. And someone said to me, one of the law enforcement folks I was on a series with, another interview with, his comment was that had they, with a telephoto lens, they could have picked up her code as she was punching the garage door, to get in, because the garage door did go up. Because as I understand, her front door was a fairly barricaded door. And they had Ring cameras, but they didn't pay the monthly fee, so there was no recording. But they removed the Ring cameras from the site. So these guys knew what they were doing enough that, the surveillance, you always surveil. You do pre-target surveillance. You want to get pattern of life. And I think all those things happen. So the group that went after, I'm not calling them professional kidnappers, because they're not following the protocol, but they certainly were not. They're not amateurs. If they were amateurs, they would have been caught by now. With all the intensive focus, I mean, Kash Patel was flying into Arizona today, Tucson, and the president has been tweeting about this. And I think ultimately that media circus around this case is what they wanted. And man, I'm going on with Canadian TV, or excuse me, Canadian TV last night. I'm going on Australia TV now twice in the last 24 hours. So this case has now garnered virality around the world. And that's what I think was the end game of this, of why they're doing these ransom notes. Because I think they're trying to throw the cops off their trail, because I think that the news is going to end very sadly here for the family, sadly.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. Well, let's shift a little bit. You are obviously a well-known guy, and you've been all over the media and continuing to be. You're going to be doing a new project with us. Why don't you talk about that some?
Yeah, well, last time you had me on, I've been pushing this off forever, not intentionally. I've owed you a book for years now that I have retackled back. I've gotten the first quarter of the book done. The response from people who've read it. I mean, I just did a leadership seminar with some folks down in Naples, and these are guys all my age. They're all 55ish to 65ish, and I shared the lessons learned from my time. And it was a leadership talk, but I really went into the hostage stuff. And these, half the crowd were Lebanese Maronites. And Lebanon was the center universe of these kidnappings. In fact, two of the guys had relatives kidnapped in the 80s during the height of this, and one of them, his father, was kidnapped. So I realized, these stories are just as fascinating. And so I'm going to launch with you guys Into the Lion's Den podcast with Commander Dan O'Shea, not Lieutenant Commander Dan O'Shea, to bring on a guest. Hopefully I want to try and get one a week, 35 to 45 minutes to start, and then maybe drag it out later, but longer, going after, whistleblowers, journalists that have covered national security topics, and veterans with real world experience who now have retired, and we've all moved on. And, these stories, they're not stories now that they're fascinating to share, but if the lessons learned, if we don't learn from the lessons and the mistakes we made, in my generation of post 9/11, Iraq and Afghanistan, and even, I'm a Desert One veteran. I mean, even though I was watching the news or watching the war, when you were flying for JSOC, I was watching the CNN videos at the Naval Academy my senior year, about to go to BUDS. And I went to Team 3. I went over to Kuwait. I was part of the post-enduring. So I have the same little Kuwaiti Defense Liberation Medal. Of course, I was, I arrived a year later, but I'm a Desert One vet as well. And to go from, your take on how Desert One went compared to my take of the 20 years of OIF and OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, very different experiences. How you guys won it was 4 months of prep, and then the battle was 96 hours. Yeah. And it was, we declared victory and came home, and which leads to all this other talk. So there's so many things beyond this case that are really relevant. What's happening in the world? Trump is making, either he's Machiavellian brilliance, and I would tend towards that, because everyone's getting spun up over all these little things, and I'm really fearful that the midterms are going to, as traditional, the president loses the midterms, and then there'll be 2 years of a lame duck presidency. But there is some things that are really happening on the big strategic picture between the Maduro raid and the underlying currents. What will that mean for China's access to cheap crude oil? What will that mean for China's ability to plan to take over Taiwan? Because if they don't have oil, they're not taking over Taiwan. And their Navy, which is growing in leaps and bounds over our Navy, that takes a lot of fuel. And one thing China doesn't have, they have a lot of natural resources, but oil is not one of them. So they're wholly dependent on outsiders, and they just lost that pennies on the dollar gallon of crude that they had for years under Maduro. And I think Trump,
Iran is suspect also at this point.
Well, that's exactly. I was going to Iran next, and let's, are we going to strike Iran, and should we? If you had told me, a guy who spent my whole career in the Middle East, desert focused, that in my lifetime that the nuclear threat from Iran would be addressed, and or the regime would collapse within a year, I would have thought you're crazy. But that all happened in 1 year. And I don't get into the domestic weeds, and I can't. Trump is so hard to defend, because the way he talks sometimes, I can't defend it, and nor do I try to. But I want to be balanced on both sides. But we've got to get to where we can invite people who have an opposing opinion, and then have a vociferous debate back and forth, but then come to agreements and move forward with solutions, versus this this madness we have going on right now in the dialogue, because we are a lot of positives have happened. I mean, our borders found it was secured within a month, but
Yeah.
now we have a mess that was created by the Democrats who let 20 million immigrants in. And they did it for one thing, for political power.
Sure,
And now
sure.
they created this mess. The government's going after it, just like they did under the Obama and Biden administration. And yet all of a sudden it's now become, it's this playbook for the Antifa crowd or whatever they have. And at the end of the day, they are just little ants in the machine and fighting in the little sandbox. It's who's funding this. And that's, Kash Patel and Pam Bondi have made big promises. They're going after all this, but I mean, it's no longer a big secret who's funding all of this. And a lot of frustrated Americans are going, why isn't something being done? And I'd like to bring on experts that can go dive into the details. I'm a history guy. I know a lot about a lot of things, a little bit about a lot of things, but let's go find some people who know a lot about some of these really specific topics. And, we'll look forward to having those kind of come on. Those type of people come on every week.
You could really add some value there because that's a huge topic. Why isn't this being addressed? I mean, everybody's asking that. So I look forward to that. And you talked about the history. I've done a lot of interviews like General Comer, who was on the last combat mission in Southeast Asia with the Maiguez incident. And then the first combat mission in Southwest Asia flew across that border you mentioned in Iraq to take out the radar sites. So really all that history has to be preserved, right? So I'm looking forward to all the guys, the connections that you have. I've kind of exhausted my war stories connections, but I know you have a lot more than me. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I'm a little bit younger and you had 96 hours in a combat zone. I had, 10 deployments over 10 years. So
just for the record, I wasn't there during that 96 hours. We were in and out, but I wasn't there during that time. But, yeah.
Okay. But I'm just I'm not busting you per se. I'm just saying your generation. I mean, listen, I was in the military at the time, again, watching it on CNN. So, but it is, we have a treasure trove of veterans. And again, I look forward to bringing in guys from across the spectrum, not just the military folks, but some of the intelligence guys as well. And the journalists that were covering the war. And I've asked these folks about it. So let's, I'll keep it a surprise because I got to wind up that. But next Friday is my intent that we're going to, and we'll talk about how we want to set that up live, like you do this show, or we do pre-recorded, but we'll sort all that out between now and next week.
So it's going to be called the Into the Lion's Den. We're looking forward to that. A new podcast on armedforces.press. We'll do a big PR push over the next week. So look forward to that as well. Where can people follow you right now, Dan? What's your X handle and all that stuff?
OsheaSends.com or O'Shea Sends on X. And then I've got an Instagram feed, but I'm so old school. And so it's so much easier for Facebook. So I do have my personal Facebook, but between now and next week, I'm going to create, and people are going, man, you got so many interviews, go create a channel on YouTube. So I've got to do all that, but I'm not an admin guy, never was, but between now and then, eventually I will have something a little bit easier where people can go do some historical and Substack. I do have a Substack account, and I'm going to start pushing out a weekly Substack tied to the show. And I'm going to work on a Substack article about everything. I'm writing notes, and I already have 3.5 pages of pretty detailed stuff because the networks will go, hey, can you give us your point of view? So every other day I'm updating, like, here's kidnapping 101. Here's how it's supposed to go. Here's to why this case isn't normal. And then I'm giving my personal point of view, which now is, it's hard to do. And I'm never afraid to call a spade, and which is why the networks have enjoyed me on over the years, because I don't tell them what they want to hear. I tell them what they need to hear. And I'm nonpartisan. And I say this always, I will go on any network. And frankly, I've been on everything from Al Jazeera to CNN, Fox, Newsmax, News Nation, Australian, Canadian TV, sometimes all within the same 24-hour period. And I just first come, first serve, whoever reaches out first. But, I have never gone alignment other than with Armed Forces Press, because I want to keep my independence to say I will go on any network at any time and not be beholden to one. And I go on topics that I think I have some subject matter expertise in. I've turned down interviews when they we want to talk to a Navy SEAL about a certain mission. I said, well, that's not my lane, and it's not my, I should stick to what I know. And what I do know is kidnapping, counterterrorism, the Iraq, Middle East, but I'm hoping to have some other experts from other areas to educate me, and then hopefully educate the audience.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before.
Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, we can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
First time ever, we're bringing you MyPillow mattresses and mattress toppers for as low as $99.98. Remember, sleep's all about temperature and pressure points. Whatever sleep needs you have, we have the right technology for you. Like our MyPillow mattress topper, our queen size has over 10,000 individual comfort supports to help relieve your pressure points. And how about our 3-inch Hybrid Plus mattress topper? It's infused with copper and silver to help your body get the restorative sleep it needs. And our MyPillow and Case Coil mattresses, I personally helped develop these mattresses to make sure they have everything needed to give us great sleep. Plus, they're made right here in the USA, and they ship right to your front door absolutely free. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to get MyPillow mattresses and toppers for as low as $99.98 and free shipping.
One more question. How's the Naval Academy doing, in your opinion?
Well, I have been invited again to speak this spring. It's a huge honor because I remembered as a midshipman having my senior hosting a 3-star admiral, Bad Fred. He was the commander of Oceana Air Station. He was a fighter jockey. He's like guys like, Maverick were talking about when that movie first came out, like the guys that were like, that was the generation this guy came from. And he was absolutely remarkable. I organized the event and I got to sit next to him to the entire dinner. I'll never forget as we were sitting next to each other, this guy's a vice admiral, jet jock. I mean, the guy was, 300 combat missions into Vietnam and was at the time an active serving 3-star admiral, excuse me. I just screwed up. That's even probably more insulting than you calling me lieutenant commander. Not true. I'm just making a joke. But I talked to him about frustrations I had. I thought how the academy was getting away from the focus on building warriors. I mean, I was dealing with a kind of an incident that had happened in the academy, and I was being thrown under the bus because I had initiated conduct against a female cadet that had violated a pretty serious rule, and I'd simply just signed the form because she was guilty. I mean, she was guilty, and all of a sudden the politics were coming at me, and I couldn't believe it. And this was 30 years ago. They were playing the game. Oh well, they were trying to brush this thing under the carpet, and I'm Irish, and I'm like, no, like I got in trouble. I got a black in. I spent 6 months in restriction. We're not playing games. I mean, you either hold yourself to the standard or you don't. And I shared that with him over the pre-dinner as we're eating our salad. And whatever speech he had, he threw it out the window. And he spoke directly to the entire company of 125, midshipmen in my company, and spoke to the leadership and the requirements to hold to a standard simply on a 2-minute conversation. So I've now done this twice, and I'm going back again this April. But I will tell you, the academies you and I graduated out of in the late 80s and early 90s for me, it's not the same. They don't hold themselves. The plebe indoctrination, by my humble opinion, is a joke because there wasn't plebe indoctrination going on over the visits. Now I know it was in the spring, but I remember, I'll just put it this way, Todd. The Secretary of the Navy when I was a freshman was James Webb, who wrote a book called Sense of Honor. And Sense of Honor was a book that was controversial at the Academy because he was basically saying the Academy has gone astray. They're getting away from the purpose of the Naval Academy is to build warriors, build people who will serve at the highest levels of government, in the military, and in local communities. But at the end of the day, we're in the business of building fighter pilots, jet jockeys, Marine officers that will lead men into battle, Navy SEALs, PJs, Crow officers, and the rest. And not that everyone's going to stay for a 20, 30-year career, go become a Navy SEAL like I did. But at the end of the day, that's where the focus needs to be. And I know they've lost their way. And again, a lot of it is that they've taken out the harshness of being hazed. And I'm not advocating for physically abusing someone. Don't get me down that path. But it should be tough. Iron sharpens iron. And I was getting back to James Webb. He was criticized because when I was a freshman coming in plebe year, he allowed hazing that had not been allowed in years. And people were critical of him allowing that. Oh my God, that's abusive and this, that, and the other. And it wasn't abusive. Trust me, I've known abuse. And
Training is different than hazing, right? I mean, train somebody.
Training is supposed to be hard and physically challenging and supposed to cause threat and anguish. And then there's other mental things. It's all training for SEAR that a lot of guys that are going to go face down the road. And it doesn't matter. It makes you a better leader if you've gone through the warrior honing. And bottom line, my favorite quote is why I keep bringing up James Webb. He got criticized on it. And I read this quote pre-summer in the paper, in the Washington Post. And it was Secretary of the Navy. And someone asked him, why are you allowing all these harsh hazings to come back in the academy? These barbaric hazing rituals that were eliminated, back in the day. And he simply responded with this. He said, because I would rather have 800 quality graduates than 1,100 mediocre ones. Quote, James Webb, Secretary of the Navy, most highly decorated Marine infantry officer when he left Vietnam. And he would have probably stayed on to make general, but he was physically, had to get out of the military because of his injuries. And I've always respected James Webb. He's on the opposite side of the fence, maybe on some political things, but I've always respected James Webb and people like James Webb. And I can tell you that, the type of intensity that I went through, that you went through at the Air Force Academy in the 80s is not there anymore. And the midshipmen and the cadets, they know they can meet their father and grandfathers. They want it. They want it to be hard. If there's any better example, is we couldn't make recruiting goals except for the Marine Corps for the last 4 years under Biden. Why? Because what was the Biden administration pushing? Anyone can be a Navy SEAL, anyone can be a Ranger, anyone can do this. The girls can't do it. Oh, well, let's just lower the standard. Yeah. I mean, to the point that, I went through Buds and Ranger school, and people always go, well, what's the hardest thing you ever did in the military? And I always say, I survived plebe year at the Naval Academy, 9 months of intensive stress. It wasn't the physical stuff, because the physical was easy for me, but the stress was incredible.
Yeah.
And they're not getting that. And Todd, you think the stresses of flying a J-35 are going to be any less than what the payloads that you flew? I mean, I would imagine. Now, of course, probably AI is doing half the flying for them today, but the levels of stress to be a pilot are no different than when you were flying, or when the guys were flying in Nam, or when the guys were flying in World War II. And so we have to make it hard. And that's what I focus on. I have a leadership topic on Message to Garcia, the first leadership lesson taught at the Naval Academy in West Point. I don't know why Air Force doesn't do it, but it's such a tool. And that's what I share with these executives, because that Message to Garcia and that mindset, it's what allowed me to do the things I did in the SEAL teams and make it up to, be a platoon commander and then come back in after 9/11. And I was not on the leading edge. I wasn't Jocko Willing with Task Force Bruiser. I didn't do any of those things in my post 9/11 service, but I fought much bigger battles going after kidnapping rings and having to fight the bureaucracy of the FBI who didn't want to leave the wire, or the State Department who were worried about political perceptions. And yet, if you find a good leader who trusts in his subordinates to go execute, as long as he paints what the leadership intent or commander's intent is, and then lets his men or women go do their job. And if they have an issue, come back and, get help. But, that was a mindset. And the hostage, listen, when I get Into the Lion's Den in final draft form, it will blow people away, because I took a problem that was spinning out of control. And what did I do? I focused on a mission statement, specified an applied task, and most importantly, a mantra. And our mantra was the mantra from Hannibal, the Carthaginian general, who took 15 war elephants over the Alps and then waylaced to Rome for 15 years. Came close to becoming, turning over Rome, submitting to Carthage. And his motto was, we will find a way or make one. And that's a great mentality. That's a great mantra for life, for anyone, for any mentality. So I'm going to share the stories.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the academy's the experience stays with you for life, and it gives you, it allows you to deal with situations. I think we had 1,680 in our class to start. I think we graduated 930, something like that.